Hi, Ivan here from Clubscraft, where we help sports coaches spend more time with their athletes. And yesterday we talked about fatigue and the reasons why we start to feel fatigued. And today we are going to dive a little deeper on all the physiological mechanisms that start to manifest in our body. As our understanding on the training processes has increased and we know more about the physiological processes in our body, we started to use all of this knowledge to increase the athlete's performance. And even someone who is just an amateur training in some kind of distance running or cycling has heard some of those terms like thresholds and intensity zones. And this is going to be the topic of today's video. Yesterday we just scratched the surface by talking about how we break down carbohydrates and get energy from it. But today we are going to go a little deeper to understand the actual processes in our body to see what is really happening inside our body. The main compound that is helping us stay alive and do all the things that we love to do is called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. It's a really remarkable molecule because it helps to facilitate pretty much every process in our body, from keeping alive our cells, muscle contraction, nerve impulse propagation. So everything that's basically happening in your body is happening because of ATP. But depending on your immediate energy needs, it's going to be a different process of generating this ATP. So if you need immediate energy because you have to sprint somewhere, you are going to use the ATP that's stored in your body, but unfortunately that's just lasting you 1 to 2 seconds. After that, the body realizes it needs to generate ATP a lot more in a very short amount of time. So then it's going to resort to creatine phosphate, but unfortunately for us, we only have about 8 to 10 seconds of reserves. After that, you are going to slow down because fatigue is going to just stop you from moving. If your energy needs are a little short term, like 30 seconds to 2 minutes, we are going to use anaerobic processes to break down glucose into ATP, but it's a very inefficient process because for every glucose molecule, we are able to just generate 2 ATP molecules, where if you are doing some long-lasting exercises like running or cycling, our body is able to use oxygen to break down glucose and create ATP, and it's then able to create up to 38 ATP molecules for just one simple glucose molecule, which is a big difference. And that's why we want to stay below our aerobic threshold as much as possible and use oxygen for energy generation. When carbohydrates are produced to generate energy through the creation of ATP, lactic acid is produced, and the hydrogen ions in this lactic acid are going to mess up and interfere with our bodily processes like energy creation and muscle contraction. So once the buildup of the lactic acid is too great for us to cope with, we have crossed the anaerobic or lactic threshold. You can imagine your body as just like being a bathtub with a faucet on one end and a drain on the other one. And as long as the flow of water which goes in matches the rate at which it drains on the other side, everything is fine and your body is able to recycle the lactic acid. But if you increase the water flow or increase the intensity at which you work out, at one point the rate at which it flows in is going to be greater than the rate at which the water flows out. This is when you have crossed your aerobic threshold. And if the water starts building up even more, the water is going just to spill over. That's when you have crossed the lactate threshold, because now your body isn't able to cope with all the lactic acid in your body, and it has to reserve to anaerobic energy or ATP creation. And that's when you will only be able to last just a few more minutes until the exhaustion will kick in and you start feeling the burning in your legs, in your arms, or whichever body parts you use for the activity. However, if you are engaged in moderate activities, where you stay just below your lactic threshold. So you don't allow the water to spill over the bathtub. Your body is going to have the ability to recycle a lot of these lactic acids, and you will be able to go much longer and feel the fatigue much later. But one thing you have to keep in mind is that now the lactic acid isn't your biggest problem, but depletion of fuel, which we mentioned also yesterday, is going to be your biggest problem. So you have around up to 2000 calories available to you. So if your activities is going to be longer than, let's say, 3 hours, you have to think about replenishing those reserves at certain points so that you can prolong your activities for the amount you need them. But one of the good things is that we can train our bodies to be a lot more efficient in tolerating lactic acid and flushing it out of our bodies. And that's by employing training at different intensity levels or intensity zones. So we'll go through one of the most popular, the 5 or 6 zone levels, depending on how you count them. And we'll see what each individual zone does and what it's used for. So the first zone, or zone 1, is basically recovery. That's your everyday activities, or the very light activities where you basically go far below what you're capable of. So if you are a distance runner who runs 4 or 5 minutes per kilometer, you're going to run 6-7 minutes. So it's going to feel very slow to you, but your heart rate is going to stay very low, and your body is able to use this activity to recover and to keep the blood flowing through your body so that you are fresh for something more intense. Zone 2 activities, on the other hand, are a little more intense, but they are still at the level where while you're exercising, you can still keep a conversation with someone without any problems. And lactic acid production here is still very low so that our bodies can clear it out efficiently. But while working in this intensity zone, the slow twitch muscles in your body are starting to get stronger and are more efficient at storing glycogen and preserving it for a longer time. Then we go into zone 3, which is a more intensive endurance zone, where workouts are done usually in the early stages of your training cycle, in some preparation periods or base periods, where we want to engage a lot more of those fast twitch muscles and teach them to be a little more efficient, just like slow twitch muscles. And once the initial adaptation is done, we usually skip zone 3 workouts and go straight into zone 4. Zone 4 is split up a little differently because we try to differentiate between being slightly below or slightly above the lactate threshold. So if you're slightly below, we call it zone 4. If we are slightly above, we call it zone 5A. Here we now start to look at individual training intervals just in the range of a few minutes. This is basically done to teach our bodies to even be more effective in removing lactic acid and tolerate it for much longer times. Once we go even beyond our lactic threshold, we are employing more and more fast twitch muscles which need a lot more energy, which need it very quickly. So we are teaching our body even more to tolerate and clear out lactic acid. But the negative side of this one is that we need a little more rest between those intervals, between those workout sessions, in order for our body to fully recover from them. And then there is also the 6th zone, or 5C zone, which is the power zone, where the individual intervals are just seconds long, but the rest period between them is very long. So you're going with maximum effort, and usually endurance athletes don't go into the 5C zone very often, but it can be beneficial for people who are having trouble developing muscle mass. And because of the intensity of those workouts, you really have to pay attention to leave enough room between those interval sessions, because you are risking muscle tissue injury if you keep those types of workouts very near one after the other. Next to me, you can see an image of the rough breakdown of where you need to spend most of your time during training. Usually, if you're an endurance athlete, you are going to spend it a lot in zone 2, the extensive endurance range. You're going to do a lot of recovery workouts, and then you're going to spend some time also in the threshold and anaerobic endurance zones, because you want to teach your body to be faster and to be more efficient and to tolerate the lactic acid a lot more. There is also a blog post written for this topic, so I'll link to it in the description below. So if you want to reread it a little more in detail. That's it for today. Thank you so much for sticking with me. And tomorrow we are going to go a little deeper into how we are going to measure intensity and different ways we can quantify the workload we put on our athletes. Until then, bye-bye.